Welcome to the River is Lit podcast, the podcast to accompany Medway River Lit, a literary festival for Medway.
Won't you come down, won't you come down, won't you come down to Chatham Town? Oh, won't you come down, won't you come down, won't you come down to Chatham Town?
Hello, I'm BFH, poet and man in the library.
Hi, I'm Sam Hall, playwright turned graphic novelist.
I'm AMJ. I like writing lists and glimmer questing.
And we are the Medway River Lit team. We're Wordsmithery, a literary organisation working in Medway for the past 10 years. Last year, we were commissioned by Medway Council to produce a new literary festival, Medway River Lit. This year, we're delighted to be bringing it back with a focus on the climate and the things that are happening to it.
In this podcast, we'll be previewing writers and books who are coming to Medway River Lit in November. We'll also be giving a little writing tip at the beginning of the podcast and a moment of greenery, our tip on what you might be able to do to help the planet at the end.
Today's recycled writing tip comes from N.K. Jemisin. Own and accept that you will get things wrong sometimes.
Today we're talking to Barbara Havelock, the writer of the novel Estella's Revenge, and poet Sarah L. Dixon, whose poetry collection, A Bit Like Falling in Love, is about her enduring love for 90s indie music.
It's an absolute pleasure to be joined by the international best-selling author Barbara Havelock, whose writing career started in journalism, interviewing both the victims and perpetrators of crime. Unsurprisingly, this has seen her psychological thrillers top both the Amazon and Kobo charts. So thank you so much for joining us today. To start with, could you just tell us a little bit about your writing journey? Were you always interested in writing from a young age, or was it something you came to a little bit later on?
I think I was always interested in writing, to be honest. I can remember sort of writing short stories as a child, but I think really it only began properly when I became a journalist. And I was much more interested in the factual side of things, which is strange because I've always been a voracious reader. It was really odd. And yet my first book was, it was really an idea that came to me from when I was in my early 20s. And it had always just been there, kind of tapping on my brain a little bit. I think the thing is that I missed writing because in journalism, I'd kind of been promoted up. I wasn't writing anymore and I really missed it. And that's actually the reason why I decided to experiment with writing fiction, was just to bring me back to my love, to my passion.
Excellent. You said that you were a voracious reader. Is that something, again, that you've always been a real bookworm, really enjoyed reading from a young age? And if so, is there at the moment, would you be able to share with us what you're reading and any other recommendations for our listeners?
I've definitely always been a huge reader. I love reading, and I would quite often climb a tree and take a book with me and just sit in the top branches reading.
That sounds
loved
lovely.
it. Oh, it was idyllic. And I mean, obviously I started out on Enid Blyton, and kind of the Five Find Outers was my favourite, but also actually The Children of Cherry Tree Farm before that, and then, you know, The Faraway Tree. So all of the classics. I can remember distinctly the moment that I fell in love with not just reading because of the story, but reading because of the way that it was written. The actual storytelling was, I read The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge. I read it and I loved the introduction of the characters so much. Sort of my passion for language was really ignited. Storytelling as well as the story, because I do think they're quite distinct skills. I'm currently reading The Trail of Thomas True by A.J. West, which is fabulous. It's set amongst the male mollies of Georgian London, and they have a rat who is basically ratting all of them out. And yes, it's life or death stuff. It's absolutely fabulous. I haven't finished it yet, but it's one of those books that you just instantly fall in love with the characters. My favourite read of the year so far has been The Burial Plot by Elizabeth McNeill. Beautiful writing, and a really unusual Gothic setting, because it all happens around kind of the Victorian obsession with cemeteries. Fabulous, isn't it?
Perfect. They all sound brilliant page turners, and I really enjoy books where you almost resent having to put them down, like real life intrudes.
I think there's nothing more luxurious than a lost weekend where it's all about the book. Real life is on hold, you know.
Absolutely. And so we're so delighted that you're coming to Medway River Lit in November, and you're going to be talking about your latest book, Estella's Revenge. And I'm lucky enough, I've already read it. So without giving too much away, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about it?
It's about, on the surface, it's about coercive relationships, it's about identity, it's about female anger, there's murder, there's manipulation, and a lot of it is obviously, because it's Estella's story, inspired by Stella Havisham in Great Expectations. She's very angry about men. She's been trained all of her life to be angry about men and hate men. So ostensibly there's that. It's a story about her struggle to find agency, I think, throughout her life, because obviously her mother brainwashes her, to use a modern term, and manipulates her. And Estella is constantly struggling against that to try and find her own life, her own thoughts, her own agency. And a lot of it is actually really about her relationship with her mother. Can they find each other? Can Estella find herself? I know it's sort of, it is explained, her thinking about why she would marry Bentley, but it never quite gelled with me. It never quite made sense, because she's an intelligent, articulate woman, and she knows what Bentley is. And yet, even against her own mother's wishes, she decides to marry him, and it's no surprise that it's not a happy marriage. So it's exploring all of that as well. That there's quite a lot to it. There's a lot of different dynamics that I've pulled out of it. Yeah, but I think it's important to say as well that it's not a retelling. It is very much Stella's story. So I think of it as, rather than a retelling, which to me implies that I've simply retold Great Expectations, but from Stella's point of view instead of Pip's, I view it as an expansion of the world of Great Expectations, the fabulous world that Dickens created. So I'm not trying to replace what Dickens did. I'm trying to kind of augment it and bring Estella in.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I think it's such a fabulous premise. And I was thinking, where did you get the idea from? Because I think there are certain books where we definitely want to know a bit more about characters. But what was it particularly about Estella that almost wouldn't leave you alone?
I think the fact that she is such an enigma. Throughout the book, though, you get these very clever little tiny peeps into her thinking and the real her, and Dickens does it so cleverly. You get just enough insight, and that was the thing, was for me, I wanted to follow those breadcrumbs and see where she would take me. I wanted to kind of slip inside the cracks that Dickens had created and find out the real Estella, because obviously Great Expectations is Pip's story, and he's helpless against all of these machinations. And of course, everyone has great sympathy with him, and rightly so. But what amazes me about Estella is how many people don't have sympathy with her. How often she is viewed as, this sort of cold-hearted, unfeeling woman. But it's hardly a surprise that she is cold-hearted and unfeeling. What choices she had, the way that she's been raised, what choices she had, how awful would that be? And it was brilliant getting to explore the relationship between her and her mother, because suddenly seeing Miss Havisham's mother, not just kind of this crazy woman, essentially, you know, who's bitter and, you know, all the rest of it, everything that we know about Miss Havisham, that's completely overblown and again, just an amazing, iconic character. But what on earth would she be like as mother? Not Miss Havisham, mother. And what impact would that have? Being raised in a house, you know, there's this little girl, and that's what I kept thinking about. That was the inspiration, really. This little girl from the age of 3, she's raised in darkness, and she's told every single day, never love, never trust nobody really, but particularly men. And this would really mess somebody up. It would have long-term implications and would utterly destroy somebody. Actually, at the end of Great Expectations, we do know that Miss Havisham, she initially acted from love. She admits that, and then it got changed on the way. So she did love Estella as a daughter, and like I say, that was just, it was so brilliant to get to know both of these characters. There's a line from Mr. Jaggers, because I studied Great Expectations first of all for my GCSEs, and then I also studied it for my A-levels. So I spent 4 years getting to know Great Expectations. And for me, like I say, the sort of the fate of Estella was always slightly, it just didn't quite fit with my image of her. And I know that other people, the great thing about books is that everybody reads a slightly different book because we all have our own interpretations. But for me, it didn't quite fit with my interpretation of Estella, because there is a line that Jaggers says to Pip when Jaggers sort of reveals to Pip that actually Estella is now married. And I've had to write it down because I'm not very good at remembering these things. The stronger will win in the end, but the stronger has to be found first. He may possibly get strength on his side. If it should be a question of intellect, he certainly will not. May the question of supremacy be settled to the lady's satisfaction. Now, you're a fool if you argue with Jaggers. Jaggers knows. And I think that's a hint that Dickens had his own kind of views, maybe, that possibly he couldn't actually write because of the sort of the moral expectations of Victorian Britain. Possibly he had different ideas for Estella. I'm not saying he would have agreed with what I've done, but possibly, you know, he just had other ideas in his head as well as the ending.
And one of the things I really enjoyed was you've got your use of authentic speech. The one that I wrote down that I really enjoyed was the jolter-headed lobcock. How do you come across phrases like that? Because I loved it, but I've never heard of it before, even when I've read books around that were written around a similar time.
It was, I have to say, that is my favourite insult of the whole book. That was my favourite. But yes, basically I read books written at the time. I did a lot of Googling, and I've got a fabulous book as well that is a travel book written in the year 1835. That's pride of place on my shelf. It's actually written by an American travelling Great Britain at that time, and that's been a really amazing source as well.
And it really helps propel you into the story, doesn't it? Because much as I enjoy different types of writing, sometimes when there's a word that feels out of context, it really jars. So when there's words that you think that sounds exactly what I think people will be sounding like, it just drew me in more. So the final question I'd just like to ask is, what next? What are you working on, something at the moment?
I am, yes. At the moment, I am currently finishing writing and ready to send off to my editor the second of the Estella books. We're hoping that it will become a series, and yeah, so I'm just finishing that at the moment. Be going into writing my 7th psychological thriller. I think it's my 7th.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Barbara, and we're really looking forward to you joining us at Medway River Lit in November. So thank you so much for your time.
A few weeks ago, we had the exciting task of opening a Your Paper Quest subscription envelope on location on a sunny bank holiday.
So Barry, what is in front of you?
I can see a brown cardboard envelope which has Your Paper Quest on it with loads of books, and it says "For you" and "My story awaits."
I'm excited. It actually does feel a little bit like, I know it's Bank Holiday Monday, but it feels like Christmas has come early.
Absolutely, we are in auspicious surroundings. There are dogs, there are children with dogs, but we have some books to view. An adventure lies just beyond. So shall we just open this thing?
I'm ready for this adventure.
Yeah,
and we've been good this year, so we're definitely on the nice list.
Could you hear that? Could you hear that? Did you get that? That was me breaking the seal on the envelope. So we have, to begin with,
There's a little welcome note.
Oh yes, but I know this sounds, I quite like the fact that it's on, again, really lovely paper, giving it some heft. So it's welcome to your Paper Quest July box. We want to take this month to focus on some thrilling crime novels that focus on our protagonists being thrust against the system. So, and again, I really like the idea at the bottom that you've got a QR code, which is really easy. It says join our book club here. So
Nice.
you can actually go online and speak with other people who enjoyed the books, and you can exchange some views. Oh, I like that.
Book one in the Partners in Spying series by Rose Donovan, Death in Velvet. There is a very, very stylish cover there.
Very stylish.
With a, I think it's a flapper with peacock feathers on the front. What else awaits in here? What else awaits?
And that's
Yes.
very good, because it's got here, who doesn't want the latest fashions, but the cutting edge is a dangerous place to be. Springtime in Paris, 1936. Love it.
In the other book we have what looks to me another part of a crime series, but this time it's a little bit more post-watershed, I think. Chris Norbury, award-winning author of Castle Danger, with Straight River. I'm seeing sort of faded colours on here and a church and a river. I think we're going to be a bit noir and a bit bloody in this thing.
What a combo. It's a
Absolutely.
good one.
And what are these extra bits of paper that have come out of the envelope?
Oh my days, I've got extra here. We've worked with a lot of amazing authors and want to let you know when they release new books. So I think this is getting us in the mood for something that's coming very shortly. And I think these might actually be short stories by the looks of it. One of them looks really good. It's like a novello where it's 2 sides of A4, but there's a very nifty QR code at the bottom where I think you can get to know more about the author. And novello is a storytelling community aimed towards Indian self-published authors.
In the Straight River book by Chris Norbury, I have a bookmark here which has been provided. It's got your Paper Quest down one side of it, and on the back of it seems to be either a quote by Chris Norbury or a quote from one of his novels. You goddamn vultures, all you want is to rob us farmers blind, take our land, pave it over, take your precious money, and the rest of the world be damned. So that sounds a bit cowboyish to me.
Straight River does sound a bit cowboyish. So I noticed that there was like a sort of gold embossed
I love it.
seal on the title page, so that makes it quite special, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes it look something that is worth pursuing with. But I do like that because I think it's an endorsement of quality, that you know that you've got a good. This one is just over 262 pages, so you've got a good few pages to get invested in. But also within this one, the Death in Velvet, there's a postcard that's got confidential on the back, which I think might be a clue for those of us who want to be intrigued even further and maybe a chance to immerse yourself as a protagonist in the book.
Super, so that was our unboxing of Your Paper Quest's July subscription package.
It's an absolute pleasure to be joined by the writer, events host, poet and performer Sarah L. Dixon. So Sarah, can we start off by, would you be able to tell me a little bit about your writing journey? Were you always interested in writing from a young age, or did you come to it a bit later on?
Well, I wrote quite a bit of poetry as a teenager. They're just kind of angsty boys and, where do I fit in kind of thing, which I probably still do now a bit. I decided to do Arvan courses because I'd heard of them and I'd saved up some money for one of them. But then I went on that, and the course leaders were Roger McGough and Julia Copus.
That is hitting the jackpot there.
So yeah, at the end of that week, I came home and I realised that I'd won a £250 prize for journalism in a pathology magazine because I'd written about my wedding in the style of a post-mortem. They awarded me first prize and a certificate, and I was like, oh, I'll just get a certificate and first prize. but then I get a check. So I was like, right, I'm paying for another Arvon course.
Would you say that you yourself you enjoy reading? And if so, do you have any recommendations for our listeners?
Yeah, I've always read. I've been talking to my son about this because he's at school, and I remember being at school and not wanting to read outside for fun for quite a while, just because you feel like you have to break down everything and examine everything you're reading, which just put me off for a little bit, which I'm hoping he comes back to it. And yeah, I usually have about 10 books on the go at once.
Wow.
Quite varied. So like poetry and music and landscape and biography and dystopia, and I like kind of teen fiction novels. So yeah, quite a lot of different ones. But some that I'm reading at the moment, there's one by Lamorna Ash called Dark Salt Clear, about living in a Cornish fishing town, which I'm enjoying. And then I started reading Harvest by Jim Crace recently, and it's just so beautifully written. I think I'm kind of rationing myself a bit just because I'm enjoying it so much.
I do get that. It's almost like you know that you're going to feel so bereft when you get to the end, so you're trying to put off the inevitable a bit. Excellent. Oh, well, thank you for that. And we're absolutely delighted that you're going to be coming to Medway River Lit in November. And hopefully we'll see you performing from your new book of poetry, A Bit Like Falling in Love. Without giving too much away, would you be able to tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a extended love poem to 90s indie musicians and the crowds of the time, and being a teenager and mixtapes and being in a crowd again now and feeling like you're a teenager and making friends, going to gigs solo, which was scary the first time, but you make more friends that way because you can just travel around the crowd and you don't have to kind of find your way back to anyone in particular.
Perfect. And do you have a favourite poem within it, or a poem that really speaks to you more than the others?
There's one that I think the crowds are enjoying. It's one that's kind of, it's becoming a firm crowd favourite, I think. This is called My Body as an Aging Indie Mosh Pit. It bounces nostalgia and lifts me. It hangs around the edges, pushing others upright, at the times when full immersion seems too much. It headbangs enthusiasm, dances like it's 15 again. It wonders if the songs were always this loud. It wears the t-shirt some judge it should have moved on from. It's happy in a tight squash of elation, and it carries more pounds than is healthy. It sweats tide marks onto new merch and decades-old treasured teas. It doesn't try to drink pints. It isn't here for that. Before, after, but not in this moment. It doesn't wear headbands or hats. It wears sensible shoes, no steel toe caps, no stage diving. It knows it's too old for this, but adrenaline says it's not. It knows it will ache tomorrow, but it wants to live in the now. Tomorrow is for bruised ribs and trampled toes, and it will carry itself into the week with a scuffed invincibility.
Love that. That's so evocative. It absolutely just takes you into the heart of a gig. And I think that is the one thing that when you're saying you might not regret it, but you'll feel it the next day, that I've recently had to work at a couple of festivals for the day. And when I was there, I loved it. But my body the next day let me know that you should have sat down more. Maybe you should have worn slightly more sensible shoes. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was really gorgeous. Talking of gorgeousness, can you describe the cover of your book? Because I just love the design.
I asked a guy, Mark Reynolds, who does a lot of work for 90s indie bands, and I was kind of fitted in between Pearl Jam and Placebo, and he does kind of all the he does the album covers and the calendars for Jim Bob. So I thought if there's anyone I want to ask first, I'll ask him and just see if that would work. So yeah, he designed the cover for me, and yeah, there's a picture of me in the crowd on the front with my arms in the air at the barrier, looking very happy.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. And talking about Jim Bob, I believe that when you come to Medway River Lit, you're going to be interviewing him.
I am, yes.
Excellent.
I don't know what else to say about that.
If listeners they don't know too much about Jim Bob, would you be able to give people a flavour of him and his career thus far?
He was the singer in Carson and the Unstoppable Sex Machine back in the late 80s, early 90s. And they played until, I think it was 2011, 2012. And then they haven't played again as a band together. But he's got quite a successful solo career now. And he's got, how many books has he got? I don't know. I'm going to say 9. Yeah, but it's a good mixture because the kind of ones about like tour diary ones, and then there's a couple about a man in an old people's home, and I think he won an award for writing from an empathic viewpoint of older people for that. And then this next one is kind of about all the lyrics, his lyrics in Carter and his lyrics in his solo career.
No, he sounds like someone really worth checking out. So thank you for that. And I was just wondering, talking about like the late 80s, early 90s. So do you have a favourite gig from when, not necessarily from that era itself, but do you have a favourite gig?
Well, I'm kind of torn. So yeah, my first ever gig was at Manchester Academy, and it was Carter with Sultans of Pinga's support, and I was 17. And it was brilliant, and we all lost each other. We were in the middle of it. It was like chaos. It was great. But I'm going to choose another gig that's actually from 2008, and that was also a Carter gig, but EMF was supporting, and I'd never seen EMF, and it was in Birmingham, and my ex and I we got like a problem rescue dog, and we handed him over, and we were like, freedom, after a year of having this dog. Been out in Birmingham having quite a few drinks in the daytime, and then we got to see EMF, and then my ex he wasn't a Carter fan, but he was by the end of that gig. So yeah, it was a great night. And then we stayed for there was like a club night after that as well. So that was really good.
That's quite a testament, isn't it, to be able to convert someone in one night. Just as a last question, Sarah, I was just wondering, what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Ooh, yeah, I don't know. The books kind of seems to be taking off a bit. It's just, yeah, someone contacted me today to say, can we interview you for BBC Humberside tomorrow? And I was like, yes.
That's brilliant.
And I've just been offered a gig in Hexham as well with Kate Fox in October, and I've got my book launch coming up before River Lit on the 10th of October, like local to me. And then I'm kind of looking into maybe interviewing John Penny from Ned's Atomic Dustbin at Wolverhampton Lit Fest. And then, yeah, I need to get hold of somebody at Shine Festival, because I'm going to Skegness for 3 days for the Shine Festival in March, and I want to get on a stage and I want to share my words there. So yeah, that's my next thing, is kind of Louder Than Words. I'm kind of talking to as well about reading there next year. So music festivals, I suppose, is the next thing.
Perfect. And I'm sure people would absolutely love to hear what you've got to say, especially because I think you can really tell from just speaking to you, you've got that passion, you were there, and that really comes across. So we genuinely can't wait until you come and visit us in November at Medway River Lit. But thank you so much for your time this evening, Sarah.
It's competition time. You can be in with the chance of winning a signed copy of Sarah L. Dixon's poetry collection simply by liking and reposting our latest post on Facebook. The winner of last episode's competition was Carson from Rainham. Well done.
Well, that's nearly it. But do remember to tune in next time, because the next episode, Anne-Marie will be interviewing the writers Maggie Harris and Thomas McMullen. Here's today's moment of greenery. Did you know that your used Tetra Pak milk and juice cartons can now be recycled at the curbside, along with plastics and glass, in Medway? Thanks to Sarah L. Dixon and Barbara Havelock. And also thank you to our festival friends, Louisa Campbell, Matthew Adcock and Chris Brown.
Stuart Turner and Stephen Keyville. Thank you.
If you'd like to become a festival friend and be mentioned on this podcast, as well as get excellent exclusive merch, visit the Festival Friends page of our website. Thanks to our sponsors, Your Paper Quest and Medway Council. And also many thanks to Stuart Turner for letting us use Chatham Town from his 2016 album Abdication House. Find out more about Medway River Lit on our website, www.medwayriverlit.co.uk. That's www.medwayriverlit.co.uk. Follow Instagram, Medway River Lit 2024, and Facebook, just plain old Medway River Lit. So, the river is lit. Thanks for listening.